Hello, my name is Jon Soza, and this is the second of my Fireside Chats. Before I begin, though, I want to give a shout out to John and Dory Zaccardelli with Four Corners City Outreach. God bless you guys. Anyhow, it is now April 2020, and we just finished going through the month of March with this pandemic, and it was truly a month of madness. Now, if there was no pandemic, March would have been the month of March Madness in college basketball, where all these teams get together and play this big tournament. And during the March Madness, Dick Vitale said that March Madness separates the contenders from the pretenders. And that's kind of what's taking place with this pandemic right now, is with the Saints. It's separating the contenders from the pretenders. So my title of this little message this afternoon is Marching Through the Madness. We can, with God's help, march through the madness. And, if you've been watching the news, you see there's a lot of madness going on in our country and throughout the world. You got people fighting over toilet paper. You got people partying on the beach. You got one guy had a coronavirus party, I believe, in New York City, where he had 42 people crammed in his apartment having a party. You had people going to the store and buying out all their guns. I mean, it's truly madness. Peter tells us in 1 Peter 1, 5 through 7, which is my text, it says, "We are protected by the power of God for a salvation ready to be revealed in these last times. In this you greatly rejoice, even though now, if necessary, you've been distressed by various trials, knowing that the proof of your faith, which is more precious than gold, even though tested by fire, will result in the praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus." See, as saints, as we go through trials, at the end, there should be a revelation of Christ. And that's what I pray for in our lives. As we go through this pandemic, may it be revealed in our lives. Are we a contender or are we a pretender? So 2 points I want to make is, number one, the pandemic reveals true faith. And number two, the pandemic reveals true values. So as we're going through this pandemic, churches are now closed. We can't go to church. We can't play church. We can't hide out in the church. Our faith is now being exposed. Do you really have faith through this, or do you have fear? Do you really have peace, or do you have panic? Have you been casual with Christ, or are you able to have communion with Christ all on your own? What kind of faith do you really have? Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians 13:5, "Examine yourself, test yourself to see if you're in the faith." Socrates, a wise guy, said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Do you know, sometimes God uses this isolation as a shortcut to our soul. Isolation really introduces us to ourselves. We can really find out who we are as we just face ourselves. Are you a contender with God? Or are you a pretender with God? We see in the Bible, many men of faith had to go through isolation. Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. Moses, 40 years. Imagine that, 40 years in the wilderness. David spent time in the wilderness. Apostle Paul spent time in the wilderness. John the Baptist spent time in the wilderness. And they all learned this one thing, as the psalmist said in Psalm 73:28, As for me, the nearness of God is my good." As we go through isolation, we need to realize that all I really need to get through this is God, to be near to God. For in his presence is fullness of joy. So, somebody once said we don't really get to know God until we really need God. And right now, we need God. And I pray that this little message will help you have true faith and get to know God. So the pandemic reveals true faith, but it also reveals true values. Winston Churchill said, "We are stripped bare by the curse of plenty." We in America have so much stuff taking up our time that we are stripped bare of a relationship with God. We fill our lives with so many things. We crowd God out. So now God has to shout. You see, C.S. Lewis said, "Pain is God's megaphone shouting messages." Sometimes God has to bring pain in our lives to get his message across. So the message is, what is God saying to us today? He's calling us to him. What do we really value? Jesus said, "Where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be also." Do you know when the Titanic was sinking, a wealthy woman on ship ran back to her cabin. She didn't grab her diamonds. She didn't grab her jewels. She grabbed an orange, because that is what is of real value. You see, this virus reveals what is trivial. My favorite football team, the Kansas City Chiefs, just won the Super Bowl 2 months ago. I've been waiting 50 years for this. Now, with the pandemic, it seems so trivial. Football does. What is important to me? What do I value? My friendship with God. As for me, the nearness of God is my good. Timothy is spoken to by Paul in 1 Timothy 6:17, and Paul says, Timothy, instruct those who are rich in this present world. Don't be conceited, and don't fix your hope completely on the uncertainty of riches, but on God. Fix your hope on God. Proverbs 18:11 says, a rich man's wealth is like a high wall in his own imagination. You know what? The wall's coming down. It seems like Wall Street might be coming down. Psalm 20 verse 7 says, some trust in chariots. Some trust in horses, but we're going to trust in the name of the Lord our God. So if I have a relationship with God, I know that I can march through this madness because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. John Mott said, with God everywhere, without him not over the threshold. I don't want to go through this pandemic without God. I want to be able to march through this madness with God. I'll close with a little poem that says this. It says, I walked a mile with pleasure. She chatted all the way, but I grew none the wiser for all she had to say. I walked a mile with sorrow, and not a word said she, but oh, the things I learned from her when sorrow walked with me. So I encourage you today to draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, that you may receive mercy and grace to help in time of need, because this is a time of need. This is a time to have true faith and have true values. So I thank you for your time. I pray this fireside chat will light a little hope in your life. God bless you.